Development fees and,
Let's review first the sheet that I sent out, which takes our list of fees that we had identified. And what I did was this sheet here. Okay. All right? Okay. It's called proposed fee changes. And as you recall, this is the universe of fees that we had discovered a couple of years ago, all throughout the code book. And this is sort of like a scorecard for what's happened with this fee ordinance that's been proposed by the council. We've got 89 slots filled, but keep a note that the development fees include 18 separate application fees and 17 escrow fees. They're all different. And that, in addition to that, there is one other grouping that in fire prevention is 12 separate fees as well. So we have quite a few fees. The ordinance that's been proposed by council covers. That's the 2024 order? Yes. No. 544. Yeah, that's.
Yep.
Yeah, the one and we want to give it this quick MTRAC review because it's on the next council agenda for movement for consideration and public discussion. So what you have in front of you is a scorecard of all the fees that have been changed, all the fees that we identified, all the fees that have been changed. And I personally just have two questions about the list, but we'll hold them till we review everything else. Now, does anybody, now keep a note, by the way, that
Dennis, what I didn't understand, there were some fees, like tent permits, $100, that, I didn't see that being changed.
right, nothing. The only things that changed are the things that are
Proposed.
in red.
Why wouldn't something like tent fee?
Well, okay, hold on. That's a question we can pass on, but first let's review what they are changing.
Okay.
Thank you. After everything I just said, it's, I'm not repeating it. Okay, so the comment, anybody have any comments, by the way, about these fees? I have a couple. If you want me to comment first, I will.
Go ahead.
The fee agenda, the fee package was pretty well scrubbed. The city did a very good job of scrubbing through these fees. And there were lots of fees that were taken off the book. They're still on our list, but, and I would assume, and Maureen, you can clarify this for me if you would. When a fee is taken off, let's say, for example, the dry cleaning plant fee used to be $213. It's been taken off the list. Now, does that mean, I think it means that it goes over into the other business category.
that is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I did here on this list, because all those fees, hi, Paul.
I believe I read that that's going over into laundry.
Yeah, that's gonna be combined with the laundry fee, but all of these fees that were removed from the list are identified on my list here with the 300 and an asterisk. Because all of those businesses now are not gonna have their own separate fee. They're gonna have to pay the business fee that all other business on line 33. That's the way that the code's working.
Yes,
So in some cases, that means, like for the nightclub, for the dry cleaning, that means that the fees, or laundries, that means the fee's actually going to be reduced, right?
Well, in most cases, yes, and in several cases, it's been increased. So, and if you want to run a nightclub in Cape May, we don't have one, I don't think anymore, but it's going to cost you $300 instead of, what's that?
1,000.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, I guess the question I had, I actually had a question for Maureen or Paul. On the residential rentals, I'm concerned and confused why the fees were reduced in those categories. The ordinance reduces, for example, the big one, the big mansion rental, it was reduced by $200. And those are the categories that Sarah's identified as being delinquent in their fee charges, their fee payments. So I was just wondering if we could talk about that for a while. What's the rationale between lowering those fees?
For the residential rentals?
Yeah, for the big ones.
So I don't know necessarily whether or not we targeted the big ones. Paul doesn't.
I think we evaluated the fees based on what it costs us to
do the
operate,
work.
to do the work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really cost us anymore. And plus, we were really aligning it for, we've looked at changing it to bedrooms, right? So we looked at it so that, look at how it's aligned in the pricing schedule. When we convert to bedrooms, that's going to be kind of the breakdown as we break it down into bedrooms. So we were, so that, figuring those top two categories in square footage are really going to be the top category in the bedroom category, and that's the fee that they're going to be. So it really would, we're changing the fee for them this year, and then next year we're going to convert it to bedrooms, and you might have one to go this way, one to go that way based on square footage and bedrooms, but but it doesn't, from a city perspective, whether it's that top tier or the second tier down, it doesn't cost the city any much more to manage and create that mercantile permit.
Which was the point that the clerk made, and understanding the function and the work that she and her team do, which is really why she, said, like, year in, year out, that there is no more or increased expense to be able to process a mercantile fee. So we have to, she is the owner of the process, she is the person who manages it, so she understands the business. So that's why you see some of these adjustments. This was very much based on Erin's input and one of her staff members who sat in on the meeting with.
And if you're
with
looking
Paul and I.
about that they're going to require more city services, that's reflected in their tax bill.
Right.
Right,
A larger square footage building's going to pay more in taxes, and so that's where
That's where you make up
that's where
that-
we cover them in
funds.
their
Right.
costs for city services.
So Dennis, I saw it as being revenue positive because the largest category, the smallest homes, are going to be increasing by 25%. So the revenue will be positive most likely.
Yes.
Where my concern comes in mostly is, as Sarah pointed out last meeting, the area that we have the lowest level of compliance on a percentage basis are the larger homes.
Okay, so I want to stop.
Hang on.
I want to give you an update, because that's actually from Sarah's work. It's not necessarily, an audit was done internally after the information, so Marty, you can finish, but I want to make sure that we explain what the audit did illustrate once we took Sarah's file.
Okay, so I just think it's sending the wrong message by reducing their fees. I understand the rationale for it, and fees shouldn't be political or punitive. My reaction to it when I saw that those fees were going down was simply, this was where we had the lowest level of compliance. We know that many people with the larger homes, their listings are not accurate, truthful, and we're almost kind of rewarding them. So that was my reaction. I don't know that we do anything with that. I just wanted to share what my thinking was.
So I think on going to the bedrooms, which we've all agreed will happen next year, is a better measure, because for the most part, they are published on many of the sites like that. They're going to illustrate how many bedrooms that they have.
They're published when they are being rented. They're
Yes.
not necessarily accurately published when they submit the paperwork to the city, right?
Right. So, but we can validate that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We did take Sarah's file, which was a tremendous amount of work, and it was, a really good starting point for an audit tool, and I'll let Paul follow up on that. But we did find that about a third of them actually had mercantile license of the number. There was a third that actually had filed but had not completed. So they were in the clerk's system and waiting for follow-up. A third did require follow-up and are being worked through the city manager and code enforcement. So it was a great exercise, but, you know, two-thirds of them had been either addressed in one form or another and had either an active mercantile license or were deficient on a document or something
Yeah,
like that,
processing.
yes. And so that we were not as far out for the original numbers. And we've talked, Paul is following up on the company
Right.
that was previously brought up to Kevin to follow up with. It's really much more in Paul's
And I think
house.
I think that was the important part of what this did, was
Right.
showed the need, you know, definitively, and, you know, the city will take a more proactive stance in maybe utilizing a company to
Right.
find those things. So
Right.
I think that was the positive that came out of that whole analysis, was that.
That's kind of the forward motion we all wanted to see when we
Right.
made those recommendations.
Right.
That's great.
So let me float a proposal. If we are moving to bedrooms next year, why not just leave it alone for a year? And then when we convert, instead of converting it twice, just do it once.
Because then
takes a whole-
it's better just to, we're doing the fees this year, and then, you know, that way we're not doing a double conversion and,
We've put this out as an ordinance. It's, you know, in the public space now. We've made the, you know, decision to move forward. It's been something that's been asked for. I don't think at this point we want to dial it back for that one subsection and then have to roll it back out next year. Plus, there's other components. Aaron does need to work with the vendor, SDL, on some of these conversion changes, and the system process, the system programming for them. So having them in here doing everything at once makes much more sense. She's also hopeful that they can move to an electronic version of mercantile license renewals for next year. So getting the vendor in here to do the programming makes much more sense to try and get all of those boxes ticked if possible. And I think, Paul, you would agree with that, too. Yeah.
So you've made the decision, which sounds great, to move forward with the vendor that's going to do the audit. It's going to do.
not,
Well,
I
it's
mean, we're
bringing them
looking
in.
into it. It'll be something that we'll budget for next year.
You're going to budget for it.
Yes, yes, and we'll start that, we'll start engaging with that vendor, seeing what they need, what their cost process is.
Excellent.
And see what it is. So, I mean, we haven't engaged them yet, but yeah, we are I'm gonna make the commitment to follow through with that, yes.
That's great. Super.
Okay.
And a third, and listen, a third is a third. That's still great. I mean,
No, it is, absolutely, and that will be part of the ROI, because that was an audit sample, but if you took a look and, you know, tried to value that, you know, that's where the ROI comes, so. it was
And I will say that this is something that the city has never actually done before in a comprehensive way. And it's a good start. Let me ask you a couple of questions though, about some of the fees. Is there going to be, I guess there is going to be a game plan to look at these other fees as well?
Which other fees?
The ones on our.
Oh, the other ones on your list? Yeah, we've started looking at different ones, but, you know, we'll evaluate. You know, we have the land use development fees.
Yeah.
That we have a proposed ordinance, and I think we've asked, you know, I think council wanted to get your recommendation of whether the analysis that we did for the land use development fees was a sufficient analysis for those proposed fees. I know I've been speaking with fire prevention. They're doing an evaluation for their sets of fees. I think uniform construction, I think is, you know, I just got us some reports from Lou. I don't anticipate he's going to make any recommendation. He does his on an annual basis, looking at his whole, you know, that's part of what he has to do to make a report to the DCA and to the council. So I don't anticipate any change in the UCC fees.
Yeah, and it's been our position as an advisory committee to say that stale fees need to be examined and in a process that's regular and ongoing. It isn't it isn't going to be a one-shot deal.
And I think that's most of the fees that we have out there. I mean, there might be some straggler fees out there, but they're
About
not.
that fortune-telling fee, you're going to get into that one?
I may. You let me know. You tell me if I'm going to get it or not.
Do we have any fortune
But-
tellers left?
on Gurney Street.
Oh, okay.
no, I was a little surprised on the last page that the 10 permit fees were not increased. There were some fees there. in the last page that I looked at, that I was a little surprised at.
But that wasn't, I mean, that ordinance is for mercantile, so,
Right.
that's a different ordinance set of fees. So, I mean, don't forget that, your fee schedule was a
So you
comprehensive
would have-
list of all fees throughout the city, and this ordinance that we're talking about was just mercantile, not
See, that's-
some of those
Good
ancillary.
clarification. So what ordinance would that be, or is that?
Yeah, but their first attack was on ordinance 310, which covers all the
Mercantile.
mercantile fees. And the other attack was on ordinance 211, which is on the development fees.
Which those are the bulk
the two
of,
big-
of our revenue fees that we get.
Tents and canopies are also a future council agenda item.
It is.
All right, now, here's one issue I want to throw on the table, and Paul, get your reaction to it. When we went to, in the fee list, where is it? It's number 54, which is restaurant indoor and outdoor seating. We went from 7 to 10, which is a reasonable, I think that's what we recommended in our original. But is the city going to be able to institute a study of the current state of restaurant seating in terms of its site plan versus its actual operation? Some of these,
I mean, code enforcement routinely does that now. They do reconciliations between, if they go out there and do inspection, they'll double check between zoning and the mercantile. So it's routinely checked.
So, okay, so we're going
It's not every time, but it's routinely checked.
later in the meeting, we're going to discuss what kind of data we're going to be able to get to do some analysis from the city. Can we have a spreadsheet on restaurant seating capacities and reporting capacities?
Well, you'd have that from the mercantile list of what they report there, but that's,
Yeah, right.
What they report.
yeah, what they report.
Okay, well, we're going to be able to get that then, right?
Yeah, well, Erin should be able to provide it for what they submitted for this past year.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Is there any plan to cross-reference the reported seats on an annual basis with their original site plan?
We're not, we do a routine compliance check. I'm not,
That would be a big job, I understand,
Yeah.
to pull site plans and cross-reference, but it might be worth doing if you could,
Well,
maybe MTRAC will be volunteered to do that.
you know, we used to send the compliance guy out, spot checking and going
That's what
through
they
and
do.
actually doing the count. Do they do that? Or
yeah, they do that. That's why
Yeah,
They do it?
yeah.
they don't do every restaurant every year, but they go around and they do compliance checks. And
Didn't you share a report, or, I mean, a couple of months ago, I saw something that I think you had shared with me when I think I asked for it. Not a report, I shouldn't say that, but that Bill had been going out and
yeah,
doing.
Bill's been,
Yeah.
And they report to you then, I guess, or do they report to Deacon?
to the police. They're under the police, so
Huh?
they're under the police department, yes.
They
Code-
report to
code-
Deacon, they make their reports to him?
Yes.
Paul, the indoor seating number for restaurants, does that encompass all the seats for a restaurant, including, I mean, it says indoor seating, does that include outdoor seating? It's all one number.
No, the-
That's what I wanted,
Well, it depends on the type of permit and, so there are permits, depends on how they get their outdoor permit seats. They can have official outdoor seating, or they can have I'll call it a flex seating, where if they have some outdoor seating that's counted against their indoor seating, that they can, but they have to take away their indoor seating. So there's two ways to get outdoor seating.
okay, and it just comes back to the site plan and compliance as well. I just
Right.
concerned, because.
But the outdoor seatings all get permits. They get annual permits that's reviewed by zoning officer.
I know, I guess it's just, yeah.
Is
I
it
don't want to
one
mix
of the-
compliance with the seat, with the number of seats, but I just want to ensure that we're
They
checking off both
They do
boxes.
they do routine and compliance inspections, yes.
Thanks.
When we went to outdoor seating in the COVID era, is it my understanding that the outdoor seating was not in addition to the indoor seating, that it was the same number transferred out to the street?
Under COVID, it was, you couldn't increase your total number of seats.
Right.
It was indoor seats that you had brought outside.
But, so now we do it, that's still in effect?
They should.
Yes, under the outdoor, if you get a outdoor seating permit under section, what is it, 438? I forget what this section is. But you could go to the planning board or zoning board and get a site plan amendment to have dedicated outdoor seating,
Is anybody doing that?
which would be in addition to indoor. It's a different process. But, so, there are places in the city that have site plan outdoor seating that is in addition to their indoor seating, and there are some that have outdoor seating that's flex, that's a subset of their indoor seating, and there's some that have, on the mall, that have, mall permit
Yeah.
seating, patio permit seating that is in addition to their indoor seating. So there's multiple ways that a business can have that outdoor seating, but they get a mercantile license, they deem, and they
They get a
pay for
mercantile license under this code.
also.
They have to report the number of seats, that determines.
Indoor seating and outdoor seating, and they pay a fee for both.
But then how do we ensure that those seats they're reported are not in addition to their indoor seats?
As I said for like the third time, we do routine compliance inspections to make sure they're compliant.
Okay. Gotcha.
Thank
But the process is that they would need to go to either zoning or planning board for a site plan review to add those seats?
If they want them to be permanently added seats, yes. Except for the mall patio permits. They don't need site plan approval for that.
Thank
And they're permanently added seats, or not permanently, but they're seasonally added seats.
Has anybody done that?
What?
Gone to the planning board or zoning board?
Yeah.
To get additional?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions about the fee? The development fee, let's review that for just a second. Paul, come, oh. You want to talk to? Secret meeting in the back. Did everybody get a copy of that ordinance? Yep. 544? Okay.
I don't know if I
I
did.
made copies just in case you
Give me a copy.
didn't bring it with you.
You mean 2024?
No, this is the one,
Which one?
this is the one that changes the development
She
fee.
wants one too.
There's three.
It was in the big document.
Yeah, 544, right?
Yeah, 544. Do you have that?
Yep.
Okay.
Do you guys have them?
I need one of those.
What's that? No, we're still in the fees.
Does he want one? Better. He's got it.
Not at this point, no. Oh, yeah, you can bring it up. We can talk about it. I don't have a problem talking. What we're doing here for this particular item was to just review that ordinance. But you can talk about it if you want to.
There has not been an increase in that fee area for I don't know how many years. And with the 10 and 12-month season that we now have, that seating outside becomes an additional dining room. And the value of it exceeds greatly the program that was initiated, and it's really only considered for 3 months.
So, Jules, I watch a lot of the meetings online. I know it's very frustrating when I can't hear. Could you use a microphone?
I raised the question about the value of the seating on the mall has become exceptionally high, and it's city-owned property, and I don't believe the city is being compensated properly for the amount of the space that's now under rent to the various restaurants. And I consider or suggest that you bring that up as part of your overall increase in suggestions to the city.
It is. So I'm not sure.
It is on our list of fees that we identified.
As being increased. It's.
No, not
I
being
was
increased.
gonna say, I'm not
Oh, yeah,
aware
yeah,
of it.
outdoor seating
I'm
is-
sorry.
He's talking about, are you talking about the mall permits, patio permits?
Yes, mall patio
Yeah.
permit.
Oh, okay.
That's, on your list is number 78, mall patio permits. That's in code 324, $2.50 per square foot. That's the one you're talking about? Yeah.
We didn't get to those yet, right?
Yeah, that is on our list of,
We only tackled mercantile and development fees to date. That's all that's been, it's not to suggest, Mr. Roush, that it won't be looked at, it's just that it hasn't,
Okay.
yeah.
now, wait a
So,
minute. Let's make it a stronger statement. Not that it won't be, it will be looked at. The city is committed to taking this list and filling all of these fees with.
That was my impression. This was an overall review of fees.
It is. I'm
for the
sorry,
city.
I didn't realize what you were talking about for a minute, but it is on our list. We have it identified as a fee that needs to be examined.
The other suggestion I might make, there's been a request for a number of years that when a mercantile license is filled out, that they put the date that their site plan was approved, so that it gives the department the opportunity to look back and see exactly what they did get approval for. The other suggestion that I would make is that,
Wait a minute, let me write that down.
Well, if it was the
Yeah.
planning board, it would be when, I think that date would be there someplace.
Well, in the last 3 years, the planning board has not had an application for anything like this.
Well, there's been nothing new, that's why.
Possible, no, there was something.
well, if people have applied for an additional
No, I know where you're coming
Site-
from.
The ugly mug.
Originally, they were paying for like 10 weeks of using that space. Now they're using it almost year-round.
well, they are using it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, they're tripling it or
Yeah,
quadrupling it.
all right.
The value of it has increased significantly. I mean, all you have to do is look at the merchants and ask them, how much do you rent space for on the mall inside? And they'll tell you what it was 10 years ago and today, and there's probably a 200% difference. The city's not getting that value out of their property. That's my point. The other suggestion that I would make is that when a mercantile license is filled out, that they indicate the number of off-street parking spaces that are provided as a means of having a complete evaluation or knowledge of each property that's now being issued a mercantile license. We don't know how many spaces are available in the city. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. We need to know what those numbers are.
We've talked about that. In fact, one of our recommendations is just that when you apply for any kind of a license, mercantile license in particular, that you have to report the number of parking spaces offset that you provide as per your site plan. Because in the site plan review, you have to identify that, and then if you get waivers, then you don't have to provide that. And then those parking demands become a floating problem for all the city. That's all part of our original, remember our recommendation on parking solutions? One of the recommendations we made is that any parking solution has to begin with adequate funding, and the adequate funding has to come from identifying that impact that mercantile licenses have on the city's inability to provide adequate parking and fund solutions to fix that. That was one of our recommendations several years ago.
Yeah, the TPA's looked at that for many years. We had the same issue.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, you got to look at a way, you got to look at the way to solve the parking problem by identifying funding sources actually first. And then you can go into the market of solutions, and there are lots of solutions that the city just can't afford right now and could afford if they assessed the parking impact from off-street parking or the lack of on-premises parking.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
I do have
Sarah?
a question. I know we have the updated master list from Aaron on the cross-reference mercantile licenses.
Yes.
Right? Post-audit, is that something I should continue with right now, or do you want to?
Yeah, we're gonna do that. My plan was to take, we're only gonna meet every other month. So my plan was to ask the city to assemble that kind of data. We already have the report from Aaron, we need some other data, to assemble a bunch of data for us to spend the 2 months looking at. And at our November meeting, we would be able to make some recommendations and decisions based on data,
Okay.
all right?
So we're skipping
And by
the-
the way, Martin, the beach stuff is in that same category. We need to examine your report, and we need to also examine the individual revenue coming from all those individual tags and see whether or not adjustments need to be made on that. If you want to comment on that, you can, Martin, I want to hear what you have to say.
So, run that by me one more time.
Well, we're going to use the next 2 months to look at data. We want the city to give us all the numbers that your study
Sure.
requests.
Yep,
And we have the numbers for Sarah to look at.
yep.
And then we're going to expand this and look at the revenue from these mercantile licenses over the full collection of them. And then make recommendations based on what that data shows us.
So there are other recommendations in here. Are we still going to talk about those today, or?
No, I think we're going to hold off on
So
that.
the issue is we start selling beach tags in December. So we wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to
that's-
implement changes
Yeah,
if we don't talk about it till November.
We don't have many.
We don't have an
much time.
opportunity to make changes to the 2025 structure.
Yeah.
I thought you still wanted an October meeting, and you were going to do every other month from there. You want a November meeting?
No, we had decided to go to every other month.
Correct.
And we were going to skip September, but then I asked if we could meet in September and then start the every other month.
I misunderstood.
That's right, I'm sorry.
So our next meeting is not until November.
It's not until November, no. But to your point, Martin, what do you think we need to be able to tell council prior to that?
Well, there was one specific recommendation with respect to additional categories of tags that we could consider doing that would need to be digested by the city, determined by city council, and then implemented really by December 1st. They also generally ask us for a recommendation with respect to the beach fees themselves, whether MTRAC feels that they should be increased or stay the same. And if we don't talk about it or wrap up the discussions we've already had until November, there wouldn't be an opportunity to do that in time.
Well, okay, would you like to have a meeting in October? What's up?
Personally, I would.
It would, I think it would be better on the beach tags, because that would give us
Okay,
time.
all right.
No?
Right.
Wouldn't matter if the meeting was.
Holy mackerel, how much time?
Right, but, okay.
You can, if you want to plan for a proposal for 2026, yes, but you can't start thinking about a new tag type, because guess what? We just sent out the letter to the local schools about the picture contest for the design for next year's tags. The tag types for next year, they're set. So if you want to discuss tag types for 2026, you plan away. I don't know what type of tag types you're thinking about, and I don't know, but I mean, I think we have more tag types than any other community in the state of New Jersey. But hey, you know, if you've got an idea, throw it up against the,
So one of the
and we'll look at
recommendations
it.
that we have is that 75% of the towns in New Jersey offer a discount to seniors. So we have a proposal to provide seniors with the opportunity to purchase tags at a lower rate than normal seasonal tags. Something like that doesn't necessarily require different tags, but a different price, which could be implemented by our proposal of January 2nd if council chose to do it.
it's actually a different tag type, because it's a different tag design, because we track them by the, you know, just from an auditing standpoint, I can't do that. I mean, I understand what you're saying if you want to discount for seniors, but I don't,
Yeah,
but there again, I think it's if that was a discussion that MTRAC really wanted, you should have started this in the spring. We can't start it a month before, because to change it, I have to do an ordinance. An ordinance takes a month. And I start selling these in December. So,
Yeah.
Make it 2026.
so I don't think you need to do a special September meeting for beach tag, because I'll just tell you right now.
This is the September meeting.
Or this, I
Yeah,
mean, not
okay.
October, I can just tell you right now, we're not adding a different beach tag type in
The
for next
issue
year.
really separates into two things. One of them is an analysis of the revenue generated in this past season and what kind of tags generated what kind of revenue. That's one thing. The other issue is expanding the nature and variety of tags. Those are two different issues. And I think we will be able to get from the city all the revenue estimate, revenue analysis we need by November. We're looking back at what kind of money we collected, all right? All right, that, we're going to be able to.
Yeah, I presented preliminary numbers at the last council meeting.
No, we want to
Right.
dig a little deeper into those numbers.
Yeah,
So will I be able to get a copy of the tag report that I had requested?
Yeah, that's what he's going to give you.
it's not finalized, so as soon as it's
As soon
final,
as it's
yes.
final. That's
Yeah.
why we're not
Yeah.
going to meet next month.
Right, yeah, as soon as we have the final numbers, because if they change a little bit, I'd rather you work, if you're doing a full year analysis, we'd rather you work on the final
I'll
numbers.
table the rest of the discussion until November. I just want to make one point clear. We did start this in the spring. We talked about the fact that costs are increasing at a rate greater than revenues.
So you're looking at it discounting prices?
In years when the fees are not increased. So we started talking about revenue generation opportunities, including additional tags for commemorative Valentine's, Christmas tags back in April. So I understand what you're saying, that now at this stage it would be very difficult to do. So we'll have to add more lead time into our proposal to make sure that we wrap things up sooner.
Yeah, yeah, a proposal, especially for something like that, has to be done. We need at least, a month just to adopt it, probably 2 months, total of 3 months even just to have the public discussion of it.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're squared away on that issue. I wanted to get the committee to give me some feedback on ordinance 544. And this is really a comprehensive review, 18 application fees and 17 escrow fees. Paul and his staff did a very good job of examining what's going on in other towns so that we can have a frame of reference to whether or not our fees are adequate. And frankly, I have no problem with that process. That's the process we asked to have done.
Yeah, and added to this was that the board secretary for both the planning and the zoning board
Yes.
provided instrumental information on just what she deals with applications coming through, with applications that require revisions and modifications, working with the board engineer and the amount of time and energy it goes into when those modifications and revisions come in. So this was really a way to ensure that there were adequate funds in the escrow accounts to be able to cover the expenses associated with the board engineer, so that it didn't put the city in arrears. So it really was, one, the evaluation of development fees across the municipalities in the county, and two, with her understanding and input and what she has experienced in that position for both the planning and the zoning board, and working with the board engineer and understanding the work effort, it really seemed to be the right time to make the changes.
Yeah, and this is one of those areas, separate and apart from mercantile license, this is one of those areas that really did need a complete and comprehensive currency review. They're extremely stale. They're extremely stale. And it's the area of the code in which the fees can't be more than the cost for providing the services, which is a critical point that I think you alluded to, the fact that the process costs way more than the fees provided that covers for it. So these fees come right back into a consistent relationship between what it costs and what the fee is. Anybody else have any comments on this bunch of fees? I don't. I think it's a good job, and I think it was well overdue. I also think that I want to commend the city for taking out section 211-2, the administrative fees. That's sort of like one of the annoying things that the city's been doing to people for a long time. Aside from all the other fees, they say, here's a fee because we have some costs. It's an amorphous document that generates more annoyance than anything else. And I'm glad personally that was taken out.
So the idea by eliminating that, everything else is built into the fee itself. You don't
Yeah,
need that
right,
piece.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no
My-
point in it.
And it's identified with the service that's being provided, is really what it comes down
My
to.
only comment, when I saw it, wasn't so much the fee itself or the changes. Do we have a good spot where, when these fees are changed, that we have a date when they were actually changed, so that that can be maintained over years, so we know how stale things are? I think would be helpful.
So one of the things that I've said to the city manager and the CFO is there needs to be more of a calendar, and the city clerk, a calendar around these things. Now, it doesn't mean, and I've said this, that fees will be increased at that pace.
Yeah.
It means that there's an analysis done. So one of the things to be able to tie it to is if you get as close to the start of a calendar year as possible. So the development fees, by the time this runs through and actually becomes on the books, as well as the mercantile fees, they will be pretty close to that period of time, so we could earmark them for, January, or starting to look at them in the summer, let's just say, of 2026, to make sure that we were keeping on pace with
I think it's a great
associated
idea.
expenses.
I like the calendar. I would just suggest, in addition to the calendar, there be an actual date when the fee was put in place.
Oh, there will be by the ordinance.
Something like that, something like this, the list we did with the date on it. That's all, just like an index.
Yeah.
I think also that what the city's doing is consistent with our recommendation. We had asked for a regular review and a cost of living adjustment every other year, if warranted, for all these fees. And this is the beginning of that process. I would suggest that we in the next round of reviews, that we look at the point that Mr. Roush made, which was the mall in particular, and whether or not those fees are sufficient to cover the cost. So we'd be interested to know when the next round of fee reviews will be taking place, hopefully soon. Okay?
Dennis, going back to the development fees for a moment.
Yeah.
I listened to the city council meeting where the discussion was happening. One of the things that surprised me was when we're talking about the percentage increase in a fee, it's a relevant point, but when we talk about the percentage increase in the escrow, it's not really relevant because it's just a holding account. So even if we double the escrow amount because we don't want to chase money, it's just, you're going to get back whatever is used. So
Yeah.
it really isn't relevant that the escrow is being increased by 50% or 75%. That's to reduce the effort of the city of going after the people to collect
Yeah,
the money.
right. It becomes an enforcement
Right.
tool. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point, that you're not really absorbing that charge if you follow what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah. Do you see it that way, too?
Yeah, because. Yes, the refunds would be issued if there's any money left over. And what they were finding is, in some instances, for people who unfortunately had a denial at, a board meeting, they were unwilling to, put forth the additional funds, which made the city have the responsibility financially to pay the board engineer. And that's not necessarily the way it's supposed to work for those application renewals. So this was a way to ensure that there were adequate funds.
All right, there was discussion at the council meeting that the council was of a mind to receive input from MTRAC on the advisability of this ordinance. And so am I hearing a motion that we endorse this ordinance as a great first step to implementing a comprehensive and reliable way to set fees over time?
And just to add to that, Dennis, that the analysis that was done is sufficient associated with the development fee recommendations.
Yeah, right.
Right, okay.
And again, our recommendation, this may sound self-serving, but our recommendation was not to set any one fee. Our recommendation was to update the way we approach fees.
With the understanding, I think, that, that the short-term residential licenses are proposed to be moved to bedrooms in 2026.
Correct.
And also that there are additional fees, such as the outdoor mall fees, that
That need to be
that
examined.
warrant additional review.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, we're anticipating another round of,
Right.
in other words, all, this list we have, this three-page list, sooner or later is going to be filled all red on the side here, and as quickly as possible. And by the way, the column under date, we already started that. It's incomplete because some of these fees, it's hard to read the code for a particular paragraph in an ordinance because you don't know when that was changed, you know, when the ordinance, yeah. Yeah.
Maureen, I think you had made the point that it would be a biennial review.
I have suggested that once every 2 years. Now, you know, this, I will say in all fairness to the clerk's office, the CFO, and the city manager, I mean, this was a significant undertaking to get everything together, first of all, the information, and then to sit through it. Becomes more disciplined once you get through the process. And so what I have said is, look, regardless of whether or not we make increases, looking at the fees every 2 years should be done just so that we have more of a business approach to ensure that we are covering the expenses. And as I've mentioned, in some instances, those expenses are not going to change substantially, so we may not see increases at any given time. But the fact that we're looking at it and understand if it's necessary and needed, so, yeah.
So, for example, the store fee went up. The store fee went up by, I think, 15%, and hadn't changed in a very, very, very long time. So the 15% is not necessarily reflective of CPI, but increasing it to 1,005 in 2 years, if CPI increases by 5% over the 2 years, wouldn't require an entire new review. It simply is allowing them to keep pace with inflation.
That is correct. And inflation is one factor in this. The other is the work effort. So CPI might increase, but it doesn't necessarily trickle down and correlate directly to the expenses associated with a particular unit. So there are, I think, I would just want to state two components to this. Part of it is the understanding of what happens in the actual clerk's office for the work effort to do it. And if nothing substantially changes and it's just rudimentary sort of reprocessing, that doesn't necessarily might need to warrant an increase.
That's a good
right?
point.
Because a first-time application is very different from then just doing a renewal.
And that's a good point, that dual consideration. When the council discusses that, make sure that they roll that into their discussion, because it's really the reason why why we're doing what we're doing with the fees.
Recognizing that the cost of even doing the roll forward increases 5% over 2 years, too. The payroll cost, the benefit cost.
Yep.
So it doesn't stay the same cost, even if it's the same effort.
And by the way, that dovetails nicely with the recommendation we made to consider going to program-based budgeting, because then you'll know the full cost of anything you're doing on a quick basis. Let's move on to the next issue, which is we were going to do a PowerPoint. The machine doesn't work. So here's a hard copy handout of discussion points for looking at surplus and debt. What I did over the last couple months was to examine the process of how the surplus grows in this town. And if you can bear with me, I'll just verbalize this for whoever's watching at home. At the beginning of the budget year, you take what's in the surplus account. You add to that the revenues that you've collected that are over your anticipated operating costs. And then you take some of that money and put it back in the budget, appropriate it back in the budget, and then you have your ending surplus. And every year that rotates in, and the more revenue you collect, which is unencumbered, goes into the surplus. And what's happening in Cape May is the next page, which is the growth of the surplus. 2016's budget, the surplus account was $4 million. In 2023, the surplus account was $14 million.
This is just the general?
This is just a
just the
general
general
fund.
fund.
Each of the utilities maintains its own surplus, but I'm not talking about them right now. Now, if you look at the next chart, this is kind of interesting because that annual appropriation out of surplus into the budget typically covers what the city's paying for debt service. So I looked at those two elements of the appropriations and the revenue, and this is what you found, that in 2016, the surplus money was 2.1 million, and the debt service was 2.5. So it's going to balance it out a little bit. Over time, that relationship has clearly changed, and we're looking at a scenario in our budget where this year, in 2024, we are going to appropriate $5.9 million out of the surplus into general fund, and our debt service is $4.4 million. So that balancing relationship is escalating, it looks like, and is becoming a serious trend. Now, the surplus comes from two sources. One of them is revenues, and over the last 5 or 6 years, these four elements have generated a larger amount of revenue than was typically covered in previous budgets. Property tax, the occupancy tax, of course, the mercantile fees, and the parking meter fees. And if you look at the next chart, which is also kind of interesting, then you look at the actual budgeted revenue, it's striking, frankly. The miscellaneous revenue has increased so radically that it's almost flowing money. And property taxes increased along with it as well. Now, this next chart is kind of convoluted, but it shows all four of the sources of revenue that the city has over the last, since 2017. And you can see that delinquent tax pretty much stable. The use of surplus increasing a little bit. Property tax looking flat, frankly. It's pretty good. But look at what's happened in the miscellaneous revenue category. It's gone from $6.3 million to $12.0 million. A lot of money. And this is exactly what happened in that section of revenue that was across the board. If you look at these things, you can see where the sources of this new revenue came from. Everything, with the exception of ABC, which is statutorily capped, we can't collect any more revenue from ABC than we are currently collecting. And the only other category that didn't expand was interest, which is understandable given the nature of investments recently. But the two, parking meters, hotel rooms, EMS is a lot of money on the other licenses. And then now that we're changing the residential rental ordinance fees, that line there is going to go even further, I think. Now, the other thing that causes surplus is conservative revenue estimates. And basically, there's 4 reasons why they're done, and they're all good reasons, except for the last one. We need a rainy day fund. We need a hedge against unanticipated costs. It's got to be there. Everybody's domestic budgeting system operates on the same pattern. You got to have some money in the pocket in case something happens, in case you need a new battery. And spending patterns change as well. And so you really can't plug accurately numbers because you don't really know how much you're gonna spend for any one thing. There's a lot of changes from a budget from the first month to the 12th month. And you have that routine cushion built in. The only one that doesn't make any sense is the last one. And we really can't accept the concept that, well, we do that because that's what we do. And especially in a case of this issue, which the trend appears to be something that needs some attention.
I want to give the city credit under the current administration. They are much better at not falling back on that. That's the way it's always been done. There are several new things that have come out of MTRAC's recommendations since I've been a member that the city is actively pursuing, including, for example, the third-party review of the mercantile fees.
Yeah.
It would be easy to say, well, we don't need to do that because that's the way it's always been done and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
satisfied.
Yeah.
So I want to give the city credit for that.
No, you're absolutely right, and I want to echo that sentiment because it's refreshing to see what's happening with the way the city does its business. And it's refreshing because, Bob, you know as well as I, you of all people should be able to say that what the city's doing now is late years improved from
And
the way.
the fees also, that doing that comprehensive review is something that I've heard many times, and finally acting on it is a huge positive.
Yeah, and Bob's point is, back then, they didn't have any money. They didn't have to worry about a surplus because
We didn't have much.
a wing and a prayer. And so this is what that rainy day fund conservative estimate looks like on a chart, and you can see that it's typically, there's a gap there. And here's what the gap looks like. Every year since 2018, we've basically generated more revenue to those percentages in the 15 to 19% range. The only other problem year was 2020, and we all know what happened then. We were lucky to have a budget. We were lucky to get through it without the kind of damage other towns had. But the trend is that we're budgeting 15 to 19% under what the actual revenue is. Now, if you look at debt, the same situation applies. There are debt loads in each of the funds, and the debt service includes principal and interest. Now, the general fund debt service since 2019 has expanded from $2.8 million to $4.4 million. There's more debt. That's actually a 47% increase in the general fund debt service. In 2016, it was 14% of the total appropriation. 2023, it's 16%. So there's an inflationary factor going all throughout this issue. And here's our current debt load. Of all three of the utilities, $35 million is our current debt load, and we're paying $7.1 million interest on that eventually when all of those bonds are becoming realized. And here's some spreadsheets that show the interest paid in the current fund, the water and sewer utility fund, and the beach fund. Now, so the issue is, and let's discuss this one, is what is the appropriate surplus level? What should the surplus be? Just in theoretical or academic terms, what is it? Well, the Government Finance Officers Association has the best practice inventory. And they recommend that, an appropriate surplus would be 60 days' worth of revenue for your operating expenses. It's about 16%, which covers 2 months, 60 days of your.
2 months, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, I mean, this is the 20,000-foot view here. There's a lot of variables that go into that kind of thing, but generally speaking, from their professional recommendation, you need at least that much money to cover yourself. And so here's what you got, and this chart's pretty interesting, actually. The actual appropriation, the amount of surplus we are carrying
Magnifying glass.
as opposed to the annual appropriation we make in Cape May, it has escalated from 2016, where it was 21% of the total revenue, to 60%. So theoretically, if you use the association's model of how much did they ask you to put in here? 16%. You could, and that's for 2 months, 16% in 2020, the bad year, you had a 36% cushion. So you could have gone 4 months.
But the 16% doesn't account for a COVID-type
No.
episode, right?
No.
Where revenues could show a sharp decline while costs of continuing the
But,
city
no, yeah.
continue. So I would be comfortable with saying 16% is on the low end. I don't know that 60% is maybe on the high end. But that also, two things have happened. One is that the city actually benefited from the post-COVID period in terms of the revenues that came in to
Yeah,
the
it
city.
did, and it did because
Yeah,
of
because
what
not
we
so
are.
much money, yeah.
It was a bounce back year. Everybody
Right.
wanted to get down here. and
Right.
That's when.
Well, and the lack of international travel. So,
Right.
there were several factors that led to that, where this trend is not likely to continue. We'd love for it to, but it's going to start to get constrained as conditions in the world change. Could go the other way. You just don't know.
Right, but,
And I do, just
Well,
to.
if you have a hurricane or something, it's,
yeah.
To
well,
follow
that's
up
why you have a
on,
surplus.
to follow up on what Martin is saying, the majority of our revenue is variable, right? It's based on tourist dollars, either through parking, hotel,
Yeah.
I illustrate it. It's no guarantee. And I'll use my healthcare background. It's the same thing in healthcare. People have a tendency to make decisions about elective procedures during hard and difficult times. We are in the same kind of market.
Right.
And so I don't disagree that maybe 60% is too high, but we have been in that bump period for the last 2 to 3
Yeah,
years. And there may be a trend that shows differently in the next 2 to 3 years.
I agree.
Yeah, and I don't know whether or not, again, that 60% may appear to be too much, but there's always that feeling that sometimes, and I guess it's more a conservative approach to, more is better.
Yeah, it's true, and I'm not saying we're going to recommend anything except a couple of things on the last page, but we're a unique community because, and we showed that at the last couple of meetings, we've had some data, 40% of our revenue comes from property taxes. And we're, in Stone Harbor, that number is 75%. So we have a very strong source of alternate revenue.
That comes over the bridge.
Yeah, it comes in and out, and it's because of what Cape May is. And I'm not suggesting we do anything about this now. I'm
The interesting thing
acknowledging.
is that the only AAA, S&P AAA is Avalon. The only AAA rated municipality in Cape May County is Avalon. 67% of the revenue comes from property tax.
Yeah.
I'm surprised we're not AAA as well.
Well, you know why? Because it's interesting. I think the point to that would be they know where their money's coming from, and it's more guaranteed. And so therefore, it makes your budgeting a safer bet. You're only going to work within what you know. whereas we have 60% of our monies out on the street at any given time. And so you have a tendency to maybe be a lot more conservative in your budgeting and what you're keeping in surplus because of the fact that you can only rely on paying 40% of the bills at times, right?
No, that was.
Yeah, and
that was
that's-
the point I was trying to make. is
yeah.
that, you know, that because of the fact that we're not at 2/3 of our revenue coming in, which should be a pretty well-known number, right?
Yeah. We
Versus
have a
ours
good
isn't.
track record.
I'm still a little surprised we're not AAA.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
I mean, and that we shouldn't, you know, find out what it would take to move us to that level, because that would help. We all would love to be AAA.
Well, and the other thing about revenue in COVID, too, is that the spikes in revenue were not just because of occupancy tax. They were because of property tax, too, because we had an awful lot of homes that were overpriced and sold at the overprice, and that generated an increase in property tax yield. Not many people's property taxes went up, but that was the total city yield for property tax jumped pretty significantly and very rapidly right after COVID came into effect.
And building on Bob's point of, in his administration, you didn't have the luxury of spending money, we've got some major projects coming up that this kind of surplus allows us to contemplate. There's a certain gentleman that keeps on bringing up the growth of the surplus, of the debt load. And I know that our debt numbers are good today, but we've got the desal plan and we've got the seawall project coming up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Without this kind of surplus that can be devoted to it, could start to strain the debt load.
Well, let's take a look at that, because that really is where I want this discussion to go. And let's jump to the last page, which is the list of, this is off of Paul's report back in June, I think. These are all the projects that on the capital menu. And the desal plan's not even on this one.
Well, you know,
It's just for this is just for capital for 2024, yeah. It's not for the bigger long-term projects, which is desal, seawall. I mean, there's a number of other things that are being discussed that would add to that.
With significant grant levels associated with it that we don't really know the cost to the city yet.
That's exactly right. But other projects, Martin, that have not even, sort of been fully vetted or discussed or even understand, but we know that they potentially are out there.
Look, going back to the slide 22, is another recommendation from that organization, which is that a municipal government should have a formal policy on how they maintain surplus, what it's used for. And the issue here is that Cape May doesn't have one of them.
I would think that would be hard.
No, it's not that hard.
No?
No.
So
How do
Dennis,
you
would
know when
you,
you're going to have an emergency? I mean,
Well, a policy
we
would,
must have to put some aside for that.
a policy would have to identify the amount of money, the floor to which you would have to go before you would need to use the surplus. What circumstances necessitate the use of surplus? And, a process answering those questions is an assurance to the public that there's transparency in your government, that what you're doing with your tax money, like, for example, as an example here, we've generated a lot of revenue from residents and visitors, but by the same token, while that money sits there, we're paying debt service to buy stuff that we could avoid if we use some of the cash.
Hey, I'm for that.
So if you look at the project summary, maybe a good idea might be to examine some of these things, pick them out of there, and instead of bonding for them, pay for them
I agree.
in the budget.
There has to be some point at which that would occur. you would think.
Exactly. And I think the data shows,
I agree.
that there's so much money in the surplus right now that you could actually do some of that
Yeah.
and avoid interest
Paying
payments.
the interest, yeah.
Because who knows what the interest payments are going to be. So I
So
think,
what would you consider to be an appropriate floor? I mean, unscientifically, without having,
well, I would go back, I would use the association's,
with some recognition that we have a much more variable economy than other
We do, we
communities.
do.
So
Yeah, we do. We also, yeah.
25%, 30%? I mean, trying to put a bow on all this work that you've done, I would think that we could make a recommendation that an appropriate floor for surplus would be 30%, with there being, some type of an articulated, transparent plan for any
I think
excess.
30% would be good.
no, wait a minute, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
You don't want to spend the money.
No, here's what I don't, here's what I don't want to do. Here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to do the city's job.
Well, that's true.
And I think that what we've found here is that the issue of the relationship between surplus and debt and the way we handle both of those things needs to be examined by the city's fiscal specialists. Because we're not fiscal specialists. All we do is we search around the internet and look for charts and stuff like that, and we find data and we put it together. And it's interesting. It's a Cape May issue, and it's a unique issue to Cape May. I don't think there's a town on the coast that has a bigger surplus.
No, I bet there isn't.
So what you're talking about here is suggesting to the city that we could come up with a way where our professionals take this data, dig it deeper, and then do what Martin wants to do, which is to say, here's our policy. We're not going to go below this. We're going to use the surplus for the following things, and have a policy that assures the public that we're not just squirreling our money away and keeping our taxes higher than they could be. Because what's the penny worth on the tax? $375,000, is that what it is right now?
$3 billion base, so.
Yeah, so, I mean, so you're talking about something that suggests that you look at this issue and forge a policy that assures the public that you're doing what you're doing, and there's a plan for what you're doing. And that's kind of what we're saying here.
Well, I think the informed taxpayer sees what the city's doing with the surplus. It's the person that only looks at that $16 million number in isolation and says, wow, why are we maintaining a $16 billion surplus? Well, we're not. We're
We're
using
not, it's a
a lot
$14
of
million
surplus.
surplus.
Yep.
And,
Well, we're actually making money on that, too.
yeah.
Policy aside,
But that's what you mean by squirreling away.
yeah, policy aside, I think the hint is in the chart that you prepared, Dennis. I mean, you see the capital needs and the amount of money that's coming up needed for '24 and increasing to 2025. So, look, we have a smart city manager. I'm sure there's discussions that are going on. So they're aware that the surplus is there. They know what the capital needs are there. I think there's a lot to be said as far as, just how all this will play out.
Well, I wanted this issue, to follow up what you're saying, I wanted this issue to be up front with the committee and the city at the beginning of the budget cycle. The budget cycle starts right now.
Yeah.
And I would like the city to consider this issue as it preps its budget. Are there small things that they can use this surplus for that we don't have the bond for? Is there a way that we could explain, and I know what the explanation is, as Martin's already illustrated some of these issues. It's big ticket items coming down the pike that we need to be ready to spend on.
I mean,
And,
I won't say that that's, a definitive answer coming from either the city manager or the CFO, but what I know right now is what we don't know, right? We don't know about how much some of this has cost, and I think that there's this very conservative mindset that's saying, this could be a big-ticket item, and not wanting to have the burden of that expense for a desal plan if needed and necessary.
And that's the big scary
To-
item.
to- Yes, to be,
The
to be,
desal plan's the scary
to
item.
to be put on the taxpayer's back. As much as that could be avoided through iBank loans and other things is what is being pursued. But if the city needs to come up with some substantial money to put into that, then you've got this fund that could offset that. But those are things, again, that project, seawall project, promenade expansion project, there are, the beach patrol headquarters is being looked at, there is the police station when ground finally breaks. There are so many things that are on the list that, but I agree that having some type of a format that says what should be that threshold of funds, and maybe trying to put some framework around all of these other projects to say, we may need to increase that threshold, and here's the reasons why. But just going through the exercise, I would agree.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent on the city to do it the right way, and that's the right way. That's the right way. And if you go through our code book, there's no reference anywhere in our code book except for two references in some other context of a surplus. And it's just not good business practice.
Well, I wouldn't have thought anyone would have anticipated the type of surplus that we have the luxury of having to be able to put into a code book. So, just because it hasn't been thought of or it hasn't come up through an ordinance or whatever.
Well, yeah, but I get that point, but I also think that in a situation, in a fiscal environment where our monies are, as you mentioned, variable and dependent on a lot of factors that we can't control, it would be a good thing to have a policy on.
Oh, I absolutely agree, Dennis. I'm just saying, I'm not surprised it doesn't exist, because it's probably not a problem anyone anticipated us
If Bob-
having.
if
Not a
Bob had
problem,
been-
but, right.
If Bob had done this when he was mayor, we would not have to be doing this.
We didn't have any money.
Yeah, go ahead, you'll see it. So what do you want to do with this issue? You want to suggest to council that they consider adopting a policy on surplus?
I guess the question is, who has the capability to do that for the city?
Chief Financial Officer.
We should get him in and talk with him then,
Okay.
I would think.
It might also involve Leon.
Huh?
I'm sorry, it might also involve Leon, like some outside.
Leon Costello.
Yeah.
Someone outside as
Yeah.
well, I think.
All right. Why don't we suggest this then, that we have a colloquy with Leon and our CFO at the next meeting?
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right? Want to do that?
that's good, I
Good
think.
with you? All right.
That would give us a little oomph,
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Uh-oh.
Look out.
There's no comment about bond anticipation notes. Do we know what kind of debt we have with the bond anticipation notes?
You mean the bonds that we haven't actually taken yet?
No, we borrow short-term money,
Oh, yeah, right.
and that money is to be used before we bond anything. It's the bond anticipation notes.
Right.
And we borrow it at a significantly lower rate.
Right.
And it's short-term, you can borrow it up to 9 years. Do we have any idea how much that money amounts to?
No, we don't, but that's a good issue for our
I mean,
meeting.
I feel,
That's a good question.
you got $15 million or whatever in surplus, and we're doing short-term financing with paying interest. Now, I recognize that, the interest rate that we're now earning on sweep monies is in excess of 3%, and it's a little more than that. And we're borrowing money at something, just over 2%. And I don't know what that exact rate is.
Right.
Obviously, there's a benefit here with the amount of money that we have in sweep accounts. Now, I don't know in what form our surplus money is in to enable us to get all that sweep money to all that surplus money to earn sweep account interest.
Yeah, that's a good
Oh,
question.
I'm sure it is. It's probably more.
Well, then if we got $15 million in surplus, and we can earn 3 or 3.5% interest,
Should be earning 5%.
well, that's the point I was going to get to, Bob. At some point, if we can show what our surplus is on some kind of a continual basis, we can do a little bit of extraordinary investment, secure at a higher rate than 3 or 3.5%.
I would hope, well, Leon Costello would be
Yeah,
jealous.
I think that's a good issue for that meeting we're
Yeah,
gonna have.
absolutely.
And does maybe you know, Russ, what is our bond rate?
No idea.
Do you know, Dennis?
No, because it varies.
No, well,
It varies every time we go out with a bond, because I understand what
Yeah.
they do is they bid that rate.
but what we're rated for, I think, is.
Oh, the
that
bond
what-
rating was it double A?
It's double A.
Yeah.
Our bond rating is double A. I don't know.
The bond rating is double.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Is that what you meant?
Rating.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
Our rating is double
yeah, he misunderstood the question.
A. I misunderstood your question, sorry. Yeah, our rating is double A.
And that varies, I guess, depending on, when a bond goes out, what it is bonding,
Yeah.
the amount of money, the term, all those ingredients come together, and the various they bid it, so.
And Russ's question is a good one. Why aren't we at AAA? It sounds like we should be, but,
Well, it's
That's
because-
why I brought it up.
yeah.
Well, it's because Avalon doesn't have any debt, that's why.
Another question for Leon. We should-
Well, but I think I don't know. When I looked at I just looked at
You
it
have to,
quickly.
you have to ask to be rated.
I was
It
going
may
to say,
just be simply we haven't asked.
I don't know that we've,
You
when
know,
the
that's
last
a good
time is
point.
we've asked to have
Probably
it.
haven't. So they're
I
making
mean, our
money on
situation
us.
is a lot
They're
different,
making
year-
money on us.
you know,
They
from
figure,
this
why
year
give
than
them
it was 2
AAA?
years ago.
They're happy
I don't know
with
when we
double
were
A.
last
Right.
rated. But I would just suggest that maybe you can add that to the list that we should ask. When was the last
Yeah.
time we requested a rating?
And
It's
Jules,
agenda.
the question you're asking is what do we go out with new bonds and receive as a rate, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we
Well,
can't.
We have the old bonds at less than 2%, right? But you're asking how much are new bonds issued at?
Well,
What
it's
percentage?
Partially that, and also if you're AAA versus AA, you're going to get a better rate.
And we don't know what the term is. You know,
But,
So Dennis, maybe we can add that to the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
but how much
Good
did you
idea.
say we're paying for short-term interest?
on a bond rate,
Yeah.
I
Short-term,
believe
you're
it's-
talking about the sweep money.
well, the sweep money, I understand, it's over 3%. The interest that we are earning.
Well, I mean, I can buy a CD for 3 months and get maybe 5%.
Yeah.
5.2 or something.
5.2.
So
ENC.
why shouldn't we?
That's why I said we ought to be able, without any real difficulty, find out what is our residual balance
Yeah.
in surplus money. I mean, it's got to be $10 million,
That's exactly right, and that's,
and that should be at 5%.
Well, except we talked about this before, Dennis. I thought they did increase, I thought they did change things around to increase that rate.
They did.
So I don't know what it is right now, but I know we went through this whole process
Right,
before.
right.
There was a certain bank in town that used to do all.
yeah,
this.
we suggested they go shopping and.
Yeah, you bid,
And they did.
You put it out on bid, just like you do anything else.
I don't know what it is,
Well,
but they did.
Yeah, they went shopping and then they came up with a good rate.
the other issue that,
The rate they were getting.
the other issue, and maybe you know the answer to it, is the interest that is earned on the sweep accounts, where's that interest?
Hey, where's it going? Where's it deposited?
Probably into the general fund. Where else?
Well,
Oh,
Where else-
that was on
it's
the.
in each of the funds. So for
Where else
example,
would it be?
I know that in 2023, the interest earned by the beach utility was over $100,000 higher than it was the year before.
That's right.
That was where we switched our investment philosophy. So the interest was credited to the beach utility fund.
Well, that's the question.
Well, that would
Where,
make
where,
Well, they maintain a surplus too, maybe, yeah.
I don't know the answer to how this, what accounts are put into the sweep monies. I've asked that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either. I
And-
We all have a
remember,
list of questions.
I remember Kevin saying it's all, but I don't know, I don't know if it's all 16 million or not. That's a question that Kevin would be able to answer.
Jules,
That'll be-
your
that'll be
phone's
on
on the
agenda.
floor.
I get it. I dropped it out of my.
Are
And
we-
the other thing
All right,
is,
so we're
make a
clear
list
on-
of your
We're
questions.
gonna have a meeting in October.
Are we or
see
are we
that.
not? That's what I didn't.
No, we're not having a meeting in October. We're
Okay.
having a meeting in November.
So the next meeting's
And there
November.
will be two issues on the agenda. One of them is this issue, and a deeper dig into surplus, bonding, and fund manipulation.
And you're gonna have Leon here,
And
right?
Leon, we'll invite Leon, and we'll invite Kevin. And the second. You can
You
attend.
can come anytime.
You don't need an invitation. And the other issue is going to be the data analysis.
Yeah,
With-
I'll follow up on that and encourage the city to not, it doesn't need to be super final down to the last $100.
Right, okay,
That's,
that's good.
yeah.
All right, anybody else have anything? Sarah?
So the next,
We're going to talk about over the 2 months.
the next meeting is November 14th,
Is that the second
Is that-
Thursday?
is the second Thursday, and it's at 3:30 or it's at 4?
It's at 3:30. Okay,
And then it'll be every other month after that.
yes. Yes. Okay, thanks for coming, Jules.
See you.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Make a motion.
Anybody want to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I figured Russ would motion to adjourn. Okay, we're done. Hit stop recording on that computer.
Did we say 4 o'clock? Is that what we said?
They asked us to do it at 3:30 to set up the recording.